Up next on Inside the SCCA, finding ways to live the dream. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. On this episode, this is going to be fun. We've talked a lot about how to get your kid, or talked with some kids trying to make it into the world of professional motorsports. We got a different take on that this week. And for that, I'm very excited to welcome to the show Cameron Parsons. Cameron is out here with me on the West Coast. We've crossed paths several times at the racetrack and talked about doing a podcast and trying to find time to make it happen. And today we got it done. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So, Cameron, we start this show every time with a new guest with the exact same question, and you're about to get it just like everyone else. I know. Get ready for it. Brace yourself. It's not an I gotcha question. How did you fall in love with this sport that we love?
I swear it started with we've got video evidence of this too. It started with a pack of Matchbox cars on a Christmas morning when I was like 2 or 3 years old or something like that. I think lots of cars and racing stuff has kind of been in my family's blood. Like my dad was into cars, my uncles were into cars, my grandfather was, but I was the first one that kind of took to racing. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's my dad's fault, but yeah, Christmas morning, somewhere around when I was 2 or 3, it's a hilarious video to watch. But I tear open this box of Matchbox and I just start like screaming and freaking out, shred this thing open, and cars are all over the place and everything. But after that, it's weird. My coming up and collecting more and more Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars, I made a point for some reason to look on the bottom side of every car and memorize like the year, make, model of every car that I had.
Okay.
Yeah, and that just kind of like came in through, being a toddler. As I grew up as a kid, my dad started taking me to more and more races, and I think it was able to click more and more with just like, one of my favorite Hot Wheels cars I had was, oh, that's a 70 GTO. Oh, shoot, there's a 1970 Pontiac GTO in real life. Here's a Maserati MC12. There's a Maserati MC12. So connecting that to the stuff I was playing with, to seeing it in real life. Yeah. Yeah, I was doomed from the start.
Have you seen the video on it's a YouTube video at the start of the season every year? It comes up with this little girl who is able to recite the names of all the F1 drivers.
Oh, yes.
It's hilarious. I can kind of imagine the same thing, daddy's little girl sitting there watching F1, learning the names, and I kind of think that's kind of the same thing. You said you have video evidence. Is that in digital form?
Oh, man. Not at the moment. I got to dig that up. I totally forgot about it until just now, so I got to post that up later.
If you could put it in digital form, this is going to air in a couple of weeks. Get it to me, and I'll put it in here. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Very cool. So, Matchbox cars to actually doing stuff at the racetrack. Was it karting first, I'm guessing?
Yeah. I attended lots of races with my dad. Like, he took me to the Monterey Historics basically like every year. And then it was around when I was like 9 or 10, we saw that there was a local go-kart club, and so we got to check that out. And my dad asked the question, is this something you'd be interested in actually doing yourself? And I can't imagine anybody saying no when that's offered up to you. So yeah, at 11 years old, I started on go-karts with our local Kerman Kart Club.
Cool. And where was that?
Over in Kerman. It's right next to Fresno, basically, for larger cities.
Very cool. So that's 11. How young could you go SCCA racing at that time? Could you do it at age 16?
I think it was 15 or 16.
Okay.
I think right now it's 13, right? I don't think it was that young when I started.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford it anyways.
Depends on which state you're in. Because I know in New York you still can't do it until you're, I think it's 18.
Oh,
but,
right.
But in most places there's no age limit for, or minimum age for racing.
Yeah,
it's what the club and the insurance will let you do.
Yep.
I just can't imagine driving a full-bodied race car at age 13 or 14. I wasn't smart enough to handle that at that point in time. So when did you end up getting into doing cars for the first time?
Yeah, cars actually came in late a little bit for me. I started in cars when I was, I think I did the Skip Barber Racing School when I was 18.
Okay.
I used that to get my my license. And so at 19 years old, that's when I entered my first Formula Mazda race, actually at Buntonville Raceway with SCCA.
Very cool. Very cool. Did you go out east to do a Skip Barber school, or did they come west once or twice a year?
Back then they had a permanent residence at Laguna for their West Coast. So yeah, I went out there for it, which was, a dream. Coming out of go-karts and getting on Laguna for the first time was just wild.
And did you understand? I'm a history of the sport. I'm a historian. I call myself an amateur historian. It's actually what I started going to college for. One of the many majors I held in college before I got to journalism.
I consider myself a serial hobbyist. You sound like me.
Yes.
Just jump from one to the next.
Exactly. So I love the history of the sport. Did you understand the history of Laguna when you did your driver school there?
I didn't know much about it. Most of my knowledge of the history of Laguna probably came from what I saw on the old Disney movie, The Love Bug, because they had a number of shots from there.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So I knew, old Laguna Seca from some movie footage I've seen. I saw some onboard stuff from pre-infield layout, but aside from that, not a whole lot. It was all just very new to me at the time.
Yeah, awesome. So you did the Skippy school, went to Formula Mazda. I'm guessing the Skippy school car was very similar to that Formula Mazda car, right?
A little bit. I'd have to go back and remember, but a while back it was the Barber Dodge series,
right?
And if I remember right, I think I jumped in right when they got the Mazda sponsorship.
Okay.
And I think they were still running Dodge engines.
Okay, that's fine.
During that transition, at least.
Oops.
But yeah, but it was a two-frame chassis still, like the Formula Mazda was. They were running, it was like 1.6 or 1.8 four-cylinder through a some sort of I think it was a straight cut gear transmission.
Okay.
So some similarities, but the Formula Mazda. It's a pretty standard format that you see in lots of open wheel race cars. Two-frame chassis, fiberglass body. A unique standout with the Formula Mazda is that they run the 13B rotary.
Right.
So they love winding up, except we were rev limited to 6,800 RPM, which it's kind of aggravating because you're like, oh, there's 2,000 or 3,000 RPM left. Come on, let's party. But when you keep it rev limited at that lower limit, you only have to rebuild an engine every 5 or 10 or 10 years. Or in my case, I had an engine that was 25 years old that I won a championship on. And
wow.
Before we rebuilt it.
Yeah.
So it's a super low maintenance, like user-friendly car to jump into.
So what you're saying is I need to go find a Formula Mazda.
Yes. Those aren't being raced enough.
Yeah. I saw a YouTube, a guy found one, had no idea what he'd found, but went and bought it because he thought it was cool. And the owner was like, because I want to hear it run before I buy it. And the owner's like, oh, it hasn't run in 12 years or something. And they found a battery and put it on it and cranked it once, nothing. Cranked it twice, nothing. Cranked it a third time, it ran and purred like it hadn't had any problems in 25 years. It ran every day for 25 years.
Yeah.
So very, very, very cool. So a couple championships in Formula Car Challenge Series. Was that with the Mazda? With the Formula Mazda?
Yeah, that was in the Formula Mazda. Okay. So there's this series I was running called Formula Mazda Challenge. It later changed their name to Formula Car Challenge. It was largely run by the folks up at World Speed Motorsports up at Sonoma. So it was kind of their way of running our series within a series. So they had 3 classes. One was for the Formula Mazda, which I ran, or back then we called it Standard Formula Mazda. And then the other one was for the Pro cars, the Pro Formula Mazdas, that were the newer Renesis engine with carbon tub chassis and everything. So yeah, it was a championship in 2010, I think it was, in 2014,
Okay.
somewhere around there. It's old now.
All right. So when did the idea that this was something you wanted to do as a career pop up?
Very early on.
Okay.
Very early on was when I decided I wanted to do it. I started in Junior One karts when I was 11. I want to say it was probably around when I was 15 or 16 when I started getting into ICC shifters, the 125 shifters
Right.
with Pro Kart Challenge. And I think when I just kind of moved from club to more, larger, widespread regional and some national events, I saw like, oh, this is a big deal. Stuff is starting to feel within reach. I can do this. So I think that's when I realized the downside is I knew that I had wanted to do it, but nobody in my family had any racing experience firsthand. My dad and I went to visit races, but we knew nothing about what happened, behind the curtain. So I knew I wanted to, but I had no idea how or what I was doing to get up there.
Right. At that age, I suspect you start to have an idea of how expensive it is. But did you really have an idea how expensive it is at age 15?
Oh, no,
okay.
No. I can do whatever I want and the money just funnels in, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm not racing Ferraris and McLarens just because I'm not ready yet. It's not because we can't afford it.
Right. It's because they can't afford you.
Yes.
So you're now 15 years on from that moment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of water under the bridge from there. Where from the Formula Mazdas? I know you've done some Trans Am stuff. What was the progression from then to today?
Yeah, the summarized version. So go-karts to cars around when I was 19 years old.
Right.
And I got to play in the Formula Mazda for a few years, took those championships, but it was 2014. That was my second championship.
Okay.
And that was my last year fully running a season in that car. It was around there that finances changed at home.
Uh-huh.
And so suddenly we couldn't afford to have me, just pay for me to race the car anymore.
Sure.
I mean, it was already stretched pretty thin with go-karts. It was especially stretched thin in cars. And I was going to college at the same time. So it was like time was tough, money was tough and all that. And so 2014 was the year that I actually registered Parsons Racing to try and do what I could to fund my racing to continue on. And so we had the car, we had the trailer, we had the equipment. It was just, all right, I'm just not going to drive it for a while and we're going to start renting this thing out.
Right.
And so I started the business doing that. And then shortly thereafter, I also got a job at D Sport Magazine as a technical editor.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, like, even though I wasn't, I was out of the seat for a little bit, stars were starting to line up on like, something might pick up here that can work out for me in the near future. So I'm working at D Sport Magazine, technical editor, and also a thing that helped me get that position was my background in racing. I get to write articles and teach about how parts works, how performance parts can actually provide a real world benefit to you, or in some cases not.
Right.
And that actually tied me into some pretty good connections. We did some partnerships with Mazda for a couple events that landed me a couple rides in some Pirelli World Challenge events, now SRO. It'd be the TC America equivalent. So we ran some B-Spec Mazda 2 stuff, ran the Mazda MX-5 Cup car. And so all of a sudden, my whole path just started getting really weird. I'm starting to pick up random drives through the magazine, and then my name starts popping up more here and there through these connections I'm picking up while I'm renting the race car. And so as this starts picking up, a different team back then, 10 Pedal Motorsports, had me run a short winter championship for them. I forget what year that was, 16 or 17 or something like that.
Sure.
So things started picking up eventually until I could finally afford to start paying for myself to go racing again. And so, yeah, I jumped into Trans Am in 2019 and learned the ropes there, which there are a lot of.
Sure.
And in 2020, we had a pretty good showing, even navigating through wildfires throughout California, through COVID. We had races being canceled and moved around, but we did as much as we could and ended up with Rookie of the Year in 2020 there.
Wow.
Yeah, ran a couple years of that and got rid of that car. I'm working on a new project in partnership now with Factory 5 Racing for their Type 65 Coupe R.
Okay.
So we're building that Daytona Coupe replica to go back racing with SCCA and Trans Am pretty shortly here.
Very cool. Very cool.
So there's my history.
There you go. There you go. So it doesn't sound like we've established that there's not a big bucket of family money.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear any big sponsorship deals, collaborations in the story. You've cobbled along a career out of this. How many times in the last 15 years have you said, maybe I need to find something else to do?
At least 15.
Okay. And how many times in the last 15 years, how long have you been married?
Since 2019, so 6 years.
Okay. And how many times since 2019 has your wife said you need to find something else to do?
Oh man, yeah, that's a rough one.
It's funny because when I was younger and single and doing all of the SCCA races, and I was doing mostly flagging, but I had an IT Civic, I had a Formula V, and every time I started to date a young lady, they were like, their mindset was, this is a phase.
Yeah.
It'll wear off.
Yeah.
And those relationships didn't last very long.
No, I lucked out. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so then I always like to say my current wife, because that makes her laugh because she's my only wife. Then my wife and I met, and when we started to get a little serious, we had the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how the talk went. I race cars. Sometimes I drive them. Sometimes I work at the racetrack. It is something I have done for, at this point in time, I think it was 15 years. This is a part of my life that is not going to change. If you'd like to continue this relationship, you have to understand that. And no matter how long we're together, if at any point in time you tell me I have to stop racing, I have 3 or 4 divorce lawyers' phone numbers in my Rolodex at the time. That's how long ago this was.
Yeah.
And I said, here's my promise though. I will never bankrupt the family to go racing. That's my promise.
That's big.
And I said, we might get really, really poor, but we're not going to get bankrupt. And she agreed. And 27 years later, we are still together. Yeah. So the key is, and I'm guessing you're about to say the same thing, finding the right partner to travel through life with, correct?
Yeah. That's a pretty solid prenup, by the way.
Isn't it though?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I lucked out with my wife also, that we met in 2012.
Okay.
So we had a solid 7 years before we got married.
Oh, so she knew what she was getting.
Yeah. I don't know if it was just she was cool from the start or if it was exposure therapy. She was probably cool from the start, but yeah, she's been so supportive the whole way through. So I should say that when you're telling me how many times has she questioned whether I should be doing this, I think it's more like she's questioned me whether I'm sure I want to be doing this.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair.
She's tough, she's strong, she's looking from the outsider perspective, seeing me, what I go through trying to make this stuff work. And so she's looking in from outside going, you sure you're still enjoying this? You sure this is still fun? And some days not, some days yes, but as long as the overall average is I'm having a good time, then I want to keep on doing it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no job that's fun every day, right?
Exactly.
So, but when the job that you're doing is having to do with race cars, it's fun most days.
Yes.
And that's a pretty good average,
Oh yeah. It's there's been so much like difficulty and prep work and all that stuff and repairs. Trans Am was a ton of work to get that done, and that was a series where I actually did find myself getting a little burnt out when I got done racing that car in that series. I had hit my limit and kind of told myself, you know what, I'm gonna start over, start fresh, got rid of a bunch of stuff. I was like, okay, from here, I'm going to restart this whole racing thing, but I'm going to do it in a way that's more affordable and a little bit better for me to keep in just like a mental headspace to keep on top of it. And so that means doing something that I can afford and do something that I have time for, especially with the whole family now.
So your program, are you doing the wrenching and the prepping on these cars yourself, or are you running the team if you've got some people helping you? You're not racing for anyone else, right?
Yeah, I've got a pretty upscale high-end team here. That's me, my dad, and a buddy of ours,
Yeah,
who's well versed in cars, and that's all of it.
great. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So people are always shocked when I tell, we get into a conversation and I tell them I'm involved with racing and I've covered the high levels of racing and been a participant in all this, and the discussion always kind of gets to, at some point, talking about being a race car driver is a glamorous, high paying thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell them that even some of the highest, most accomplished race car drivers don't make their living driving race cars, they're shocked by that. I mean, a lot of drivers who are winning at Le Mans and at Daytona, and there are other things that they do away from the big race weekends that's really paying the bills. It's the same for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. In the racing world, money moves around in interesting ways, but like talking about relationships and keeping this stuff up while we're active in the motorsports community. I've got a day job, and I think I'm okay sharing this in public. I've got a day job with Toyo Tires.
Mm-hmm.
I'm technical field manager in business development for UHP and motorsports developments. That day job, that's for the family. That is not at all for racing. That is not a piggy bank I dip into to pay for tires or helmet or gas money or dinner while I'm on the road.
Yep.
It is all only for family. I have to draw that line. But my business with in the past, renting cars or the coaching that I do or some of the retail stuff that I do with my business now, that's all the racing stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I gotta make sure and keep it separate. But yeah, and you talk about making money racing. I mean, the things I just listed, those are not checks coming from winning a race or anything. Those are the alternative means that I use to continue doing this.
Have you ever broken even from the race side of things?
Purely behind the wheel?
So when I say ask that question, I mean from race winnings. There's a joke, and sponsorship. Without the other stuff that you do race related, not your day job, but you do some driver coaching, you do some HPDE stuff, and all of that. So from just the race side of it, sponsorships and race winnings, have you ever broken even?
Only on hired drives. Anytime where I'm running my own car, no.
Right. Okay, yeah. I asked that question because I want people to understand the reality.
Yes.
It is that way for, I would guess, probably 95% of race car drivers around the world.
Absolutely.
There are a handful of people who have, created a persona, a resume, may have some family money, who can do it and are making good money doing it. There are absolutely a handful of those people. But the vast majority of really good race car drivers aren't in that situation. It's a very difficult lifestyle when it comes to making ends meet, isn't it?
Yeah, the reality that a lot of people don't realize is like when you put it really down to numbers, at a club or a regional level, what you win for, per race, many just don't pay out at all.
Right.
Some through contingencies, like I think very few even pay cash. Most pay contingencies and credit to a manufacturer.
Yep, like you get enough to buy 2 tires or credit for
Yeah.
for a set of shocks or something like that.
Exactly. So, like, most of it is the battle to alleviate your expenses, even for a season championship in some of these club and regional events. All right, I raced 12 races. All it cost me was $40,000, or if
Exactly.
I'm going on a budget, 10 or 20 or whatever. And or if I'm a big spender, the sky's the limit.
Right.
And then you get your season championship check, and you're like, all right, so that's going to pay for tires for race 1, and then after that, I'm on my own again.
Yeah. So, like for TA2, for example, that's a pro series.
Yeah.
I know there's a purse. What do you know off the top of your head approximately what it pays to win a TA2 race?
Remember, did I ever sign an NDA or anything for this?
You can ballpark it.
So some of the higher finishes I've had and heard from, basically, it would cover entry fee and tires, maybe.
That's a good way to do this.
For. Yeah.
So even winning a Trans Am TA2 race, you're not even covering your expenses for the weekend.
You're definitely not coming out on top. You can delve out a good chunk,
right?
But you're not going to end up on top.
Because we talk about in SCCA when we had this discussion with Michael Lewis a couple of weeks ago, double dipping. Getting a second race or a third race, triple dipping like he does sometimes. The most expensive cost for racing, if you don't ball up your car or blow a motor, are 2 things: tires and travel for the team back and forth to the races. Even entry fees, well, maybe at the pro level, entry fees are pretty high. I know the entry fees in IMSA can be $6,000 or $7,000 a weekend, and $100,000 if you buy the whole season up front and that kind of stuff. But at the club racing level, there's the most expensive cost, again, assuming you don't have any crash damage or blown motors, is travel back and forth, hotels, gas for the transporter, gas for all the other cars for the people to come if you're paying for that kind of stuff for them, hotels, food, and that's before you even put a car on a racetrack.
Yeah. It's why I keep a sleeping bag and a bunch of sleeping mats in our trailer.
Nice.
So I mentioned the 3 of us doing these events. It's me and my dad and our buddy Terry. That's been our operation, our crew since I started Parsons Racing in 2014, and since then it's just been a camp out in the trailer every single race event. We all go in the truck ourselves. It's a lot of people don't take that into account. As soon as you race somewhere where you need a pit crew, especially where you need a pit crew for tire changes, think of what it costs for a hotel.
Oh yeah,
and flights and food, and then multiply that by however many people you got on the team. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's a thing, and it's the costs are crazy even at the club racing level, but we love it, so we keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's it is, and what's amazing is, there are some people who show up with the big transporters, or there are arrive and drive drivers who show up and it's a whole crew to prep their car for them. And that's a great way to go, by the way, if you have the money to do it. It takes a lot of the planning and consternation of doing an event and allows you to concentrate on driving. I recommend to every person who's just getting starting out, don't buy stuff until you know you really love to do this.
Yes.
Because, even an open wheel trailer and a pickup truck, if you don't have that, there's $50,000 right there for that. If you're buying a new pickup truck, if you're buying a used one, you're going to spend anything that's reliable enough to get you back and forth to the racetrack. Between the trailer and the pickup truck, you're probably talking $20,000.
Yeah.
That doesn't even count your race car. You haven't even bought a race car yet.
I mean, short tangent, but when I kind of burned myself out on the Trans Am stuff, part of that was due to keeping up with the costs and the upkeep of the race car. But another side of that was our truck. I made a terrible choice in the truck we got. It was a 2004 Dodge Ram diesel, a great truck. This particular one was not a great truck, and we had to replace a fuel pump on the freeway on the side of the road. We had to replace a wheel bearing at the track. It needed an engine rebuild the first year that we got it, like all kinds of crazy stuff. So I decided I was done with it and got rid of my stuff. And I did get a new diesel truck a year or two ago. But I hate to say that getting rid of the TA2 car, take all that money,
Yep.
put it in the truck,
Yep.
and then I have nothing left.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a lot that goes into what we do and how we do it. Let me do this. Let's take a short pause here for a second. I'm going to thank the folks who helped me do this, and then when we come back, we're going to get some tips from you on how to manage all this kind of stuff, and we'll dig a little deeper into this. So stay with us for a second. I want to take a second here to thank the people who helped me do this. Of course, this is Inside the SCCA presented by RaceSchool.com. Great group of people out here on the West Coast. They do their school mostly at Buttonwillow these days. Of course, now they have 2 tracks at Buttonwillow to play at. I still think they do a race or two at a school or two at Willow Springs on occasion here. Full SCCA competition licensing schools, defensive driving, high-performance driving days, a lot of one-on-one coaching. They have a really cool way that they do what they do. It's a little different from a lot of other schools. It's why a lot of people come out here to the West Coast to do their schools. That and the fact that they're pretty much guaranteed not to have to do their school in the rain. That's a positive. So check them out, raceschool.com. Also, Solo Performance Specialties. Love those folks. They take care of me when I go to Solo Nationals. They're at most of the Solo National Tour events. If you don't catch them at a Solo, you can go to their website and check them out. All of their info in the show notes. Then there's Ray Esports. You ever do any iRacing and realize that a lot of people just want to run you over? Well, go to Ray Esports. Most of the folks who race with Stevie Ray are SCCA racers, and we treat the sim racing a lot like we treat it as if we're actually in cars, where we try to race without contact. That is one of my favorite parts about all of his stuff. So check him out, Ray Esports. He's got the Tuesday night leagues as well as the Weekend Warrior leagues, Formula V, Spec Racer 4, Spec Miata, good stuff there. And then, of course, Dave Penterick. He is a GT1 driver, also this year's Spec MX5. He is William R. Penterick and Associates. If you need some financial planning help and don't know what to do, or even if you do know what to do and want a second opinion, give Dave a call. He is a great guy, an SCCA racer. He will not steer you wrong. David Penterick is all his information also in the show notes. I think you know Dave, right? Because you've done some Trans Am stuff.
I think I've just come across him before. I haven't met him personally.
Yeah, good guy. So, all right. So let's talk about some of the other stuff you do. You do some Speed Venture stuff, some HPDE stuff. When you talk with people at an HPDE, and they find out what you do outside, is it a reality check for them when I want to go pro racing?
Yes and no.
Okay.
There's every type of personality in this whole sport.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, just the different personalities that we get, where somebody can show up to one HPDE day and think, you know what, I just got caught up in F1 Drive to Survive. I know what I'm doing here. I don't need your directions.
Yep.
Thankfully, those are pretty few and far between.
Yeah.
A lot of what we get, though, is people that have made the step to sign up for an HPDE. Like, okay, cool. They're not drag racing off of stoplights. They're not rolling cars off of canyons. They made that additional step to take their car, decide they want to do something fun with it in a safe, controlled environment. So usually the customers that we get, all right, there's some elevated level of responsibility and passion for this. And so lots of them come in with a pretty open mind, wanting to learn. And yeah, I think it's funny when we list out the credentials of just like racing background and all that stuff. Lots of people that we get, though, are so new. They don't know what any of it means. Right. So I can say, like, race with SCCA, race with Trans Am, this car, that car, whatever. And a lot of it is just like, it sounds like something.
Yeah. Yeah, a little over their head.
Yeah. But it's pretty cool. I mean, it's the intent anyways, as like a coach, or when I'm working with a newbie group, it's not to flex credentials anyways. No. It's to, kind of get to know the audience and cater the day to their liking and their fun. And it's always fun when I get to sprinkle my stories in there. Or my learning experiences, so they don't have to learn stuff the hard way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just you get so many different kinds of personalities in this stuff.
And coaches, not all car drivers make good coaches. You know,
Very true. Yeah.
It takes a special skill set to figure out how each person learns. That's I think the most important part. You know, good race car drivers, even at the amateur level, know how to drive the line, where to brake, all that kind of stuff. But to be able to relate that and understanding that everybody learns, not everybody, there's 3 or 4 different ways that people learn. But you got to figure out what each student, how they are, to be able to explain it to them. That's a pretty impressive skill when you're good at it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I won't pretend to be the grand master of this either. I think it's like with anything else. The more you learn, the more you realize that there is more that you can learn. And so, like, as a coach myself, I would love to get coaching from as many others as I can, just to help fulfill what other perspectives I can attack this stuff with. But you remind me, one thing that I really appreciate was when I got hired at D Sport. Once I got settled in there, somebody reminded me, just like, why we hired you, right? And what are you talking about? And he said, you've got all this racing experience, driving experience. I was coaching at the Allen Berg Racing School at the time. And I had, I think, just recently come off of a master's degree in IT. And so they told me, you can drive, you're a coach, and you did a degree. That means you understand how this stuff works. You can put it in writing. You can break down topics for people to understand.
And you can fix the network when it goes down.
Yes. Yeah. Which I got called on too many times too for IT help. And I'm just like, I'm not doing that anymore. But yeah, you're exactly right. Good driver does not make a good coach. And in many cases, a good coach doesn't have to be a good driver. Coaching itself is very much its own thing.
And the other thing I've learned is, as a guy who's now at an advanced age, you have to kind of let your guard down or let your preconceptions down as a student. My coach is 19 years old. And he's a fantastic coach. He's really good at explaining things. And if I don't get it the first way, he has another way he can explain it. And at age 19, any age, that's a great skill. That's why I'm learning from him so much. But to have the wisdom at that age to be able to identify the different ways people learn is fantastic. But for me to say, I'm going to allow myself to be schooled by a kid, when usually I'm thinking that I should be schooling the kid, that's something also that I think is something the student has to be open to the coaching. And to the coach's delivery, and maybe not feel threatened by different aspects. Maybe the coach is famous, or maybe the coach is really young, and to be able to be that sponge and take it in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned a minute ago, like a good coach doesn't always have to be a good driver.
Right.
But it helps, right? Like there are data engineers that are amazing at analyzing data and can pick apart what the car needs or what the driver needs to do, but they themselves may have never been in a race car. But when it comes time to communicate these ideas to the driver or to the student, that firsthand experience really helps.
Sure.
Right. Being able to be open and communicative, and the whole I've been there kind of experience.
Right.
It's like, I'm telling you to do this. You feel that. You feel what the car is telling you. And when you can kind of draw that connection, finding 5 different ways to say the same thing to figure out, they're this kind of student. That's the kind of thing that clicks with them. Like that's one of the main goals of a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What is your advice for someone who wants to do what you're doing? And let's get "don't do it" out of the way.
Yeah.
Is it a mindset? Is it an understanding that there's so many different layers to the onion that you have to be able to be willing to do to get it done? What is the key, or what are a few keys?
I think my perspective has changed a lot over the years. I think early days, it's just the regurgitation of, if you set your mind to it, you can do anything, right? And then later on, I realized, okay, passion's not enough. If you do it smart, you can do whatever you want it to. And now the boat that I'm in, I generally tell people, whatever way you can do it that keeps you happy, just do that. Make sure that it's worth it. And so for me, earlier or in the earlier years of trying to make this work and not knowing how to make it work, I kept on just hoping and thinking somebody would just notice me. And it happened in a very, very small scale for little opportunities of just, somebody heard that I was a good driver and good communicator or something. And so, would you mind stepping in to coach for this guy? And it started out with, volunteer gigs. And back then, thankfully, I wasn't married with kids back then. I had time to volunteer and build up my experience when it came to learning data systems at the Allenberg Racing Schools. When I first started, I wasn't a coach. I was the guy that was pulling GoPro cameras off, pulling SD cards and giving them to the students saying, just, hope you enjoyed this experience. Thank you. But I got to shadow, Chris Brown. I don't know if you know him, is, expert at data. And he was doing lots of the data analysis and coaching for our students. So, he's one of the top guys for this stuff. And I got to sit in a classroom, observing him and learning from him doing it. And I got to pick it up from that. So a lot of it starts with tackling these learning opportunities to build your skill so that when the time comes for you to be tested, you're ready for it. But if you run around telling people, I can drive an Indy car, well, if you get unlucky enough someday to be given that opportunity and you're not prepared to drive an Indy car, you're going to end your career before it started.
That's right.
So take every learning opportunity you can to hone your skills and be prepped for those opportunities. And on my end, the whole playing it smart thing, I think did work to my favor because I'm not famous enough. My Instagram account, I think, is like 1,600 followers. So I'm not worth $15,000 per post there.
Right.
So a lot of this started, just a story time here. A lot of this clicked with me. The first phase was when I started renting out the race cars, because thankfully then I had an asset that I could rent out to make money off of. And I learned how to build an LLC and learned how to do taxes for my business for the first time. That was horrible. But I learned how the ins and outs of business operations and what can I do to make like an ultimate, white glove experience within my budget and reach and constraints to give the best experience possible for the drivers. So what I advertised to people was, look, you want to run a Formula Mazda? I just won 2 championships in this car. It's a good car. I know what I'm doing. You get my coaching. I don't have the budget to bring you a big old fancy crew or a fruit bowl on a covered table. But if you're here just to race, I can give you that experience. So I found the customers that really worked well with me. And we had a great rapport over the years. Some great people I got to work with just as a coach and team owner to run their cars. So that was my first phase. Second phase came in Trans Am with TA2. Those cars are amazing cars for the budget and some of the best cars you could ever drive. But I think I asked lots of the wrong people on what it takes to get into Trans Am, because they would say, oh yeah, it's super affordable. You can, it's not a lot of work. Turns out I was asking people that had deeper pocketbooks than me and paid other people to do the work. I had to figure out how to pay for it, how to work on the car. So me and my dad and our friend, worked on the car, but I still couldn't afford it. And one really crappy day at Sonoma, I had a part failure that put me in the wall coming off of the S's. And a bunch of stuff broke that I could not afford to fix. And so from there, I realized I need some help doing this stuff. So you mentioned earlier, I did not come with any big cash sponsors, but I still needed help. And so I called up some manufacturers offering up some sponsorship pitches under the condition of, look, for starters, we're going to get your parts approved for running in Trans Am, because that was one requirement. It had to be an off-the-shelf part number available to the public, and they didn't make anything for Trans Am yet. So let's do this. Let's get a part approved for Trans Am. Let's make something custom for a TA2 car. Do you need data? Do you need photo assets? Do you need video? I'll do installation stuff. I'll get some data to prove its value in the series. And so I brought on a number of manufacturers that way. And my initial pitch, though, was realizing where I am, not famous.
Right.
All I want right now is parts and somebody's cell phone number to help me dial in setup when I need it. And that's what we kick it off with. And this was kind of the deal that I did with all my sponsors. I'm not going for big money because
Right.
that's, for me, a quick way to be told no right off the bat.
Sure.
I just want these little bits. But, a few were handshake agreements, a few were contracts. And so we put in the contract, though. Let's agree, though, that we're going to reevaluate, see what my value is over the course of a year, see if we should do the same thing in the next year or see if we can dial it up the next. Because my goal here is a long-term relationship. Sure. I don't want you to just, break me out of the hole that I'm currently in with a crashed car. I want this to go on in the future for this car or any other future projects I go with. And so, long time ago, I would shotgun blast sponsorship proposals. I'm going for McDonald's. I'm going for Coca-Cola. I'm going for whatever that have no relevance to me or what I'm doing. Here, I realized, okay, I do have some audience that I can leverage my network through and the series that they might have interest in. So it's like, okay, I'm racing Trans Am. I'm also racing SCCA. I'm doing HPDE stuff with personal project cars. Where does the car show up? Where am I coaching students? What opportunities do I have for these sponsors to come on board? So it's like KW was a big help for me in the earlier years. EBC Brakes have been helping me a lot. And so what's been nice is that, look, guys, help me out with this car. You get stickers, whatever, but we know that stickers don't do much for you. What we get more is the part numbers, the coaching that I do. So when I'm helping new students out, I've never done this before. What should I get on my car? Well, what are you looking to do? I can help you do this and that and find you all the specs and everything. And so eventually, a couple years later, I'm almost done with the story.
Sure. No,
a couple years later into this, I still wasn't worth a lot to be written big checks to continue supporting me. Right. And so every now and then I would get kind of the influencer pitch of like, okay, here, have a free whatever thing, and then just make up a discount code.
Right.
And you get an affiliate commission for everybody for the stuff that you sell on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. In some cases, that has worked well for me and still works well for me. In other cases, I'm going against Costco or Walmart or parts that are sold, at different vendors. And so it had me realize, well, how about this, guys? How about we make part of the contract that not only am I sponsored by you, but I'm a dealer for you.
Sure.
And so I have not met many people, or I'm not sure I've met anybody that had this approach to me. And hopefully I'm not spilling too much and giving up to my competition.
Exactly.
But it's one of the big things that's worked out for me.
Yeah.
It came with these long relationships, and it came with being able to provide back to some of these guys. Where, how about this? No loss to you. Just give me a dealer account. I've already got my sales permit and I've got a registered LLC and everything. So just give me a deal that I can compete with these other vendors with, or give me a deal that I can extend to my direct network.
Right.
Without having to threaten or go against any, minimum advertised price issues or anything like that. And so, yeah, it's turned Parsons Racing into a retail business on top of coaching and driving and all that. And it's working out pretty well so far.
Lots of different ways to get the job done, right? And thinking about those is and finding ways like that is pretty great. Two things you said, and as before we start getting ready to wrap this thing up, that I think are worth just chatting a little bit more about, or at least mentioning. You mentioned that if you tell people you can drive an Indy car and you get that shot and you can't, that's your one shot and you're done. I have the same discussion with parents about who want to get their kids from karts up to something. And I see it happen all the time where they will go and put them in a season in some pro open wheel or even, let's say, a low-level sports car pro series, like and low being lower tier, not necessarily lower money or quality, like let's say the Michelin Pilot Challenge. And they've got enough money to do one season in those things. And the kid's not ready, or the driver's not ready. And they have maybe they get through the whole season, or maybe they wreck a couple of cars and the money they had for the full season is gone because they've had to pay for the cars. Because note to people out there, if you wreck the car, you're probably paying for it also. There's very few deals where you're not going to pay for the damage. And then they're out of money and they're done, and the kid never gets to race again. Or if he does, he's going to be mired in the lower levels of stuff and not have a chance to reach their dream. When they could have gone to spec me out of Formula Ford, Formula FE2, Formula Mazda, done maybe 5 seasons in those cars for what they spent in 1 season in a Pro Series, hone their skills, and then go to that Pro Series and just kill it. And it happens all the time. You've seen it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So my advice, it's rarely heeded, is to don't go there right away. Take at least 1 season, maybe 2 seasons in a real full car to learn what you need to learn before you go and try to spend all that money that you may have one shot at. Same kind of deal.
Yeah. It's back to playing it smart, right? It's I talk about what shoestring budget I ran on. I still have yet to this day to ever have a painted helmet because I've never felt good about making that decision of spending money to paint my helmet when that money could have gone to tires instead, because both are difficult for me.
Yep.
And so I recall back in the day, I got invited to one of those shootouts.
Yeah.
I forget how many $1,000s it was, but it's just like, you've been pre-selected. All it's going to cost is like, $2,000 or $3,000. A good chunk of change. The potential for what it can deliver is great. But I ended up skipping it, and a friend of mine went for it, and they ended up with a crash car and an $8,000 bill at the end of it.
Yep.
And those kinds of things, depending on your financial situation, can put you under. And I look at it the exact same way. It's big reason why I went into Formula Mazda. Back then, I think we got our car for around $20,000. Lots of Formula Mazdas could be had for that price, and still they're like 15 or 16. I came out of shifter karts.
Yeah.
Because shifter karts is the path to Indy, or this is the path to F1.
Sure.
You gotta go from that to F2000 Pro Mazda. There's Road to Indy, which is a great road for people that can afford it.
Yep.
But I couldn't. An ICC shifter at the time, complete, would be $10,000, give or take a few grand. You'd be rebuilding the bottom end of that engine 2 or 3 times a year, which would be like, I want to say like $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah.
And then a set of tires, we would only do 1 set, but depending what team you're with, you might be running, close to $1,000. It all added up. But then Formula Mazda, when we looked at it back to back, we're like, so you're saying I could race a car on Laguna Seca and Sonoma
Yep.
for roughly the same cost that an ICC shifter kart cost me? Well, at the time, I was already 19. Like, I need some car experience.
Right.
Go-karts were incredible for helping me hone my racecraft, and still I think nothing can replace that, except maybe Spec Miata.
Yeah.
But Formula Mazda, it's an entirely different animal. Any car is an entirely different animal from a go-kart on suspension. And so I needed that car experience too.
Yep.
And so we came to that realization of, shoot, with where I am at and in our financial position, we had better ways to spend our money with longer term benefits.
And when you said that you won a championship on a car on a motor that had 50 races on it?
Yeah.
You're making money on the Formula Mazda versus the shifter car, which you're rebuilding how many times a year?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, bottom end 2 or 3 times a year, top end every race.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's got to be, by the time you get through 1 season, you're at the exact same cost, but now the second season, you're not rebuilding all those parts, and you're now actually saving yourself money. In the end, it's cheaper to go racing Formula Mazda than it is to go racing top-level shifter karts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And my path was a little bit slower. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I got my taste of pro racing starting in my late 20s, early 30s. But I've been racing this entire time.
Yeah.
So for some people, maybe they want that one shot. If I get one entry in Indy 500, I'm good.
Yeah.
But for me, I wanted to be racing something all the time for as long as I can. And so I found the way that works for me.
That's awesome. The other point I was going to make is finding ways to keep it going, maybe not necessarily behind the wheel, finding those paying jobs. If you can be an expert on the data side of things, that is so important today. That will keep you working.
Yes.
That will keep you in either a coaching position or hired by a team to work their data. That is a long-term money-making prospect in motorsports, and it's voodoo science to a lot of people. But for those who can learn how to do it and relate it, like you said, I think that's a great path if you want to find the thing to do while you're driving.
Yeah, it's the data side and the car setup side and engineering stuff. It is so satisfying, more approachable than I think most people realize, because in many of these cases, the software is free. Like pick up Aim Race Studio 3 and just ask for some sample data online or at the track. People will give you their data. They don't care.
Right.
And learn what you can from it. And Aim put up the resources. They've got their whole webinar series.
Sure.
That you can refer to. Chris Brown's got that book, was it Making Sense of Squiggly Lines? There's all kinds of resources for it. And I'll tell you on my end, too, that just, I think I've gotten some of the most like customer satisfaction stories from data and coaching. Just the thank yous, the handshakes, the smiles that you get at the end for racing teams that need help dialing in their car setup, to the drivers themselves, just trying to figure out their way around the track. You build up a really good rapport with people when you're doing the data stuff. So it's not only more secure than other motorsports positions, but I just gotta say it's very fulfilling too.
Right. I love driving cars. Not necessarily terribly good at it. Love doing it. I love working on cars. I love tinkering. I love building. I love seeing a problem, finding a solution. And I've come to realize that I think I enjoy that more than driving. There's such a satisfaction in solving a problem and seeing the car go faster by a change that I've decided to make. And even the experimentation, maybe I made a change and it went slower, then I made another change and it went fast. I'm like, yes, that, and all of that. Do you enjoy the non-driving stuff more than the driving stuff?
I almost said you and I are a different breed.
Yeah.
Because generally, I've always told my dad, I hate working on cars. But the thing is, I hate fixing cars. I love making them better.
Yes. Okay.
So that I can totally get. The problem solving stuff. Diagnosing a problem or an opportunity on how to make something better is just wonderful. One of the best compliments I've ever gotten was when our Formula Mazda was a rental car, going through our annual tech at NCCA to get the check off for the logbook, and the guy inspecting the car looks around and goes, "Who's the owner of this?" And the driver points over at me, and the tech inspector comes over to me and huddles in and goes, what do you say? Just so you know, this is a really well-sorted car. And I was just like, oh man, okay. To have my work like recognized, like, okay, me and my dad, we know what we're doing apparently. We put together a good car. And that's just so satisfying to have something that you build that works, reliably, that works like clockwork. Seeing the results of that are really, really nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Cameron, it's time for us to say goodbye. I give everybody an opportunity to thank the people who they need to thank. I've thanked my people. Now it's a chance for you to thank all of the folks, and this might be a long list. Let me start the stopwatch. You've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. It is your chance to do your thing here. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch for this opportunity. Sometimes you don't get this window to talk about, but to go through it, Action Sports Canopies, they were actually my first official sponsor I established. So pop-up tents, chairs, anything that you need for trade shows at SEMA and PRI and all that. Action Sports Canopies based in SoCal. They've been good to me. They're great to our partners. So definitely go to them for that kind of stuff. ADM Technology, who does lots of IT support work, including remote. They're also based in SoCal, but if you're outside of SoCal, still hit them up, see if they can help you. Anti-gravity batteries has been around for a little while. Super lightweight, super powerful, and reliable batteries for cars, power stations, power storage. Fuel-safe racing cells. We've been using them in the Formula Mazda and Trans Am ever since I started in either car. KW suspension. Use them on especially on the Trans Am car. Recommend them to all my friends, especially my BMW friends who are out there. Quick Jack and Bend Pack for lots of shop tools and equipment. I just finished installing the Max Jack's 2-post lift, which fits inside a standard garage. So if you want a 2-post lift that actually fits under your garage ceiling, you've got an option with Bend Pack. Redline Oil, also longtime user of their stuff. Gear oil, diff oil, water wetter to help your car run cooler, engine oils, everything. They've got it. And Sparco for all their help with safety equipment. Unfortunately, I've put their safety equipment to the test, but on the plus side, it's helped keep me safe. And then finally, I'll add in their EBC brakes, who I use on absolutely everything for OE replacement stuff and upgrades and race car, street, HPD, all of that.
Awesome.
So that's the list.
There's the list. Cameron, this has been a great conversation. This I never really do a whole lot of prep before these shows because I like to take them where they go. And this has gone in places that I'm really happy because I think we've provided some insight and some reality checks for people, and hopefully maybe it'll help people guide themselves a little bit more with a little bit more knowledge as they kind of traverse this crazy sport that you've been doing for 20 years and I've been doing for 40 years. It takes a lot to do it for as long as I have and you have, and I'm hoping that people can learn from this. So thanks so much for being with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com. Do you like what you see on this podcast and heard? Subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube. Leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. If it's not, go put it on someone else's page. Follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is and to ask questions. That would be at Race Announcer Brian or at Race Announcer on Twitter. Also, there's a new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.